I'm Justin, 24 years old, and my parents demanded I pay my brother's $10,000 debt or be kicked out of their house. Before I tell you about the moment their faces went pale in a room full of people, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It helps to know I'm not alone in this. The air in the living room was thick with the smell of my mother's roast chicken and the suffocating perfume of cheap hypocrisy. It was our annual family party, an event my parents, Richard and Helen, threw every year to showcase their perfect family to relatives and neighbors. Laughter echoed from the backyard, but inside, here in the heart of the house, a storm was brewing. My father stood before me, his face a mask of stern disappointment. My mother was beside him, dabbing at eyes that weren't actually crying. And my younger brother, Leo, the source of all this, stood slightly behind them, a smirk playing on his lips. Justin, my father's voice boomed, loud enough for a few curious relatives in the dining room to pause their conversations. Your mother and I have been more than patient. Leo made a mistake, a small business venture that didn't work out. It's a $10,000 debt. A mistake. That's what they called it. I called it funding a lifestyle of parties and expensive gadgets with money he didn't have. Family helps family, my mother added, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. You have a good, stable job. It's your duty to help your brother get back on his feet. I stayed silent, my gaze fixed on a small crack in the wall just over my father's shoulder. I had watched that crack spread for years, just like the fractures in our family. My silence seemed to enrage him. Are you listening to me? He snapped. We are giving you a choice. You will transfer the money to Leo's account by the end of the week, or you will pack your bags and find somewhere else to live. We will not harbor an ungrateful son under our roof. The room fell silent. Even the chatter from outside seemed to die down. Every eye was on me. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins. Their faces were a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. This was the evening's entertainment. I could feel their judgment pressing in on me, a physical weight on my shoulders. Leo looked triumphant. He had won as he always did. My father crossed his arms, a final, non-negotiable gesture. Well, what's it going to be? I slowly raised my eyes from the crack in the wall and looked at him. Then at my mother. Then at Leo. I didn't say a word. I just let the silence stretch, letting their ultimatum hang in the air like poison. And as I stood there, taking in the scene, my eyes drifted past them, to a quiet guest standing near the back of the room, a man nobody here knew, a man who held my entire future in his hands. To understand my silence in that moment, to understand why I didn't break down or explode in anger, you have to know that this wasn't the first time I was made the sacrificial lamb for my family's golden child. It was just going to be the last. My role as the family's invisible support system started early. I was 12 when my mother informed me that I was old enough to pay for my own school lunches. We're not made of money, Justin, she'd said, while simultaneously signing a permission slip for Leo, then 10, to go on a school ski trip that cost $200. It's time you learned the value of $1. So I did. I started with a paper route, waking up at 5 a.m. every morning. My fingers numb from the cold as I folded newspapers on my porch. That money went straight to lunch and then to school supplies. I remember being 13 and standing in the stationery aisle at Walmart, carefully calculating if I could afford the name-brand binders or if I had to settle for the flimsy ones that would fall apart by November. Meanwhile, Leo would come home with a new video game, a gift from our dad for getting a B on a science project. My first real job was at 14, bagging groceries at the local supermarket. The work was mind-numbing, but the paycheck was a lifeline. It bought me clothes, not the trendy brands Leo wore, but clean shirts and jeans from the outlet store. I'll never forget the sting of my mother's words when she saw me in a new pair of jeans I'd bought myself. Couldn't you find something better? It's a little embarrassing, she'd sighed, before handing Leo a $50 bill for a trip to the movies with his friends. There was never any acknowledgement that the only reason I wore those clothes was because they refused to provide for me. The double standard was clearest during mealtimes. Family dinners became a performance. My parents would cook, but my portion was always noticeably smaller, or I was told to make myself a sandwich because there wasn't quite enough of the roast to go around. Yet, if Leo wanted a second or third helping, the platter was pushed his way with a smile. On Fridays, they would order pizza or Chinese food, a treat for themselves and their hardworking son Leo. I would be in my room, the delicious smells wafting under my door, eating a bowl of instant ramen I'd bought with my own money. The message was clear. My needs were an inconvenience. His desires were a priority. One Christmas, when I was 16, the difference was laid bare for everyone to see. Leo, who had been begging for a new gaming PC, unwrapped a top-of-the-line machine worth over $1,000. My present from them was a $50 gift card to a department store. I forced a smile and said thank you, but the hollowness in my chest was overwhelming. Later that day, I overheard my father boasting to my uncle, "We have to support Leo's passion. He could be a professional gamer one day." My passion was coding, something I did on a second-hand laptop I had saved up for months to buy. They never once asked to see a single project I had built. They didn't even know what language I was programming in. It was a hobby, a distraction. It wasn't a passion because it didn't come with a flashy price tag they could show off. That was the year I stopped expecting anything from them. It was easier to rely on myself than to nurse the constant ache of disappointment. My earnings, my efforts, my dreams, they were mine and mine alone, invisible to the very people who were supposed to see me most clearly. College was my escape. Not a physical one, since I couldn't afford the dorms and had to commute from home, but it was an intellectual and emotional refuge. It was there, in a stuffy computer lab smelling of old electronics and stale coffee, that I met Mark. He was brilliant, funny, and had a restless energy that matched my own. We were paired up for a programming project, and within an hour we were finishing each other's sentences, our coding styles syncing up perfectly. Mark was the first person who saw me, not the quiet, overshadowed son, but the programmer, the builder. He'd look at a piece of my code and his eyes would light up. "Dude, this is elegant," he'd say. "How did you even think of this?" For someone who was used to his efforts being met with indifference, his praise was like water in a desert. He came from a different kind of family, one that was loud and messy but full of warmth. The first time I had dinner at his house, his mom piled my plate high and his dad asked me a dozen questions about my major, genuinely interested in the answers. Felt so foreign, so normal. I saw what I was missing, and it both hurt and gave me hope. Mark's garage became our sanctuary. After my classes and my part-time job at a tech repair shop, I'd go straight there. We'd spend hours huddled over our laptops, fueled by cheap pizza and a shared dream. We were building something, an AI-driven organizational tool that we believed could change how small businesses managed their workflow. We called it Momentum AI. It was our secret, our obsession. While my family saw me coming home late, exhausted, and assumed I was just wasting time, Mark and I were building our future, line by painstaking line of code. He was the visionary, the big-picture guy. I was the architect, the one who built the intricate systems that made his vision a reality. The only other person who seemed to believe in me was my grandmother, my dad's mom. She lived 3 states away, but she would call every Sunday. She never pried, but she had a way of listening that made you feel heard. I told her about my classes, but never about my family life. I didn't have to. I think she knew. Before she passed away, she sent me a letter. Inside was a check for $500 and a short note written in her shaky cursive. "Justin, your grandfather and I always saw the quiet strength in you. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small. This isn't much, but use it for your dreams." That $500 became the seed money for Momentum AI. We bought server space and a few crucial software licenses. That letter, however, was priceless. I kept it taped to the wall in our garage workspace. On the nights when I was drowning in exhaustion and self-doubt, when the cold indifference of my family felt like a physical weight, I would read her words. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel small." It became my mantra. It was the foundation on which I built not just our company, but myself. The catalyst for the final storm came, as it always did, from Leo. After dropping out of community college, he'd decided he was going to be an entrepreneur. My parents, blinded by favoritism, thought it was a brilliant idea. They gave him a few $1,000s as a business loan for what he called a premium sneaker resale venture. In reality, he was buying hyped-up sneakers on credit cards, failing to sell them for a profit, and using the rest of the money to fund a lifestyle of fancy dinners and weekend trips he'd post all over social media. The inevitable crash came swiftly. One of his suppliers called, threatening legal action over an unpaid invoice. The credit card bills piled up. The grand total of his business mistake was a little over $10,000. He confessed to our parents, framing himself as a victim of a volatile market. They, of course, bought it completely. Around the same time, something else was happening. Momentum AI was getting noticed. We had won a small, local tech competition, which came with a little media coverage. The article was buried on page 6 of the business section, but someone saw it. Kevin. He was a guy I grew up with, someone I'd considered a friend. We'd reconnected a few months prior, and I had helped him out with a small loan when he was in a tight spot. He called me after seeing the article. "Hey man, saw that piece on your company. Sounds like you're killing it. You must be rolling in it." I laughed it off. "It's a startup, man. We're mostly running on coffee and hope right now. A long way from rolling in it." I was being honest. We were reinvesting every penny back into the business. My personal bank account was barely in the 4 figures. But Kevin heard what he wanted to hear. He saw the word AI and award-winning and translated it to millionaire. And, in an effort to ingratiate himself with my parents, he mentioned it to my father the next time he saw him at the grocery store. "You must be so proud of Justin," he'd said. "I hear his company is the next big thing. He's probably making a huge salary." That was the spark that lit the fuse. My parents, already panicking about Leo's debt, now had a solution presented to them on a silver platter. Their forgotten son, the one they never invested in, was supposedly a secret success. His money wasn't his. It was family money. It was the solution to their Leo problem. The final piece of the trap was set by my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. During one of their daily phone calls, my mother tearfully confessed the situation with Leo's debt. Aunt Carol, a master of passive aggression, said something that sealed my fate. "Oh, Helen, that's terrible. But I'm sure Justin would be happy to help. That's what a good son does. My David just put a down payment on a house for us. It's wonderful when your children can finally give back. I'm sure Justin, with his successful new company, feels the same way." The comparison, the implied judgment, the painting of me as a potential deadbeat if I refused, it was the perfect manipulation. When my mother hung up the phone, the idea had solidified into a plan. It wasn't a request for help anymore. It was an expectation, a demand. My supposed success had just become my curse. The week before the annual party was when they made their move. They cornered me in the living room, the same room where the public execution would later be attempted. The TV was off, which was the first sign of trouble. My father never missed the evening news. "Justin, sit down," he commanded, pointing to the armchair opposite the sofa where he and my mother sat like a tribunal. Leo was nowhere to be seen, which I knew was intentional. They wanted to handle this first. I remained standing. "I'm fine here. What's going on?" My mother started, her voice laced with a rehearsed sweetness that set my teeth on edge. "Honey, we know you've been working so hard on your little computer project. It's a company, Mom, not a project." She waved a dismissive hand. "Whatever it is, we're very proud of you. We heard from Kevin that you're doing very, very well for yourself." The pieces clicked into place. Kevin, of course. Kevin doesn't know what he's talking about. We're a startup. There's no big salary. My father scoffed, leaning forward. "Don't lie to us, Justin. We're your parents. We know you've always been responsible with money. You've got a nest egg. Meanwhile, your brother, your own flesh and blood, is in trouble." "Leo got himself into trouble," I stated, my voice dangerously calm. "He spent money he didn't have on things he didn't need. He had a dream," my mother cried out, as if Leo were a martyred artist instead of a failed sneaker reseller. "You, of all people, should understand that. We supported your computer hobby. The audacity of that statement almost made me laugh. Supported me? They had ignored me. They had forced me to support myself since I was a child. The only support they ever gave was the roof over my head, something they held over me like a guillotine. So this is what this is about, I said, connecting the dots. Leo's $10,000 debt. You want me to pay it. It's the right thing to do, my father said, his tone shifting from parental concern to cold, hard demand. We gave you life. We fed you, clothed you. We've given you a home even now as a grown man. Don't you think you owe us? Don't you think you owe your brother? Every sacrifice I had ever made flashed before my eyes. The missed parties, the worn-out shoes, the lonely dinners of instant ramen. I had been paying my own way for a decade. The debt I owed them was a fiction they had created to justify their own failures as parents. A lifetime of suppressed anger began to bubble up inside me, hot and clarifying. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to defend myself or explain my finances. I just felt done. I looked my father straight in the eye. No, the word, quiet and absolute, hung in the air between us. His face turned a dark shade of red. What did you just say to me? I said no. I repeated, my voice stronger this time. This is Leo's debt, not mine. I am not paying it. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. Justin, how can you be so selfish, so cruel? After everything we've done for you, what have you done? I asked the question genuine. What have you actually done for me? You taught me to be self-sufficient by abandoning me. You taught me the value of $1 by making me earn every single one I ever had. And now you want to take those dollars for the son you actually cared about. The answer is no. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them sputtering in stunned silence. I knew it wasn't over. I had just declared war. My defiance did not inspire reflection. It inspired rage. The very next day, the atmosphere in the house turned from icy to venomous. They communicated through slammed doors and passive-aggressive comments muttered just loud enough for me to hear. Some children have no gratitude. My mother would sigh dramatically on the phone. Can you believe the selfishness? I knew they were planning something. My parents, especially my father, could not stand having their authority challenged. Losing control, especially in front of me, was an intolerable offense. Their solution, as always, was to escalate. If private pressure didn't work, public humiliation was the next logical step. The annual family party, now less than a week away, was the perfect venue. I discovered the full extent of their plan by accident. I was heading to the garage to meet Mark when I heard my mother's voice coming from the kitchen, sharp and conspiratorial. I paused at the top of the basement stairs, pressing my ear against the door. She was on the phone with Aunt Carol. And he just said no, flat out, no, to my face. My mother was saying, her voice dripping with indignation, Richard is furious. He says if Justin wants to act like he's not part of this family, we'll show him what that means. Aunt Carol's voice was a faint murmur on the other end, but I could guess her response was a goading, oh, you poor thing. Richard's idea is brilliant, actually. My mother continued, her tone shifting to one of gleeful strategy. We'll do it at the party, in front of everyone. Uncle Robert will be there and all the cousins. We'll tell them the whole story. How poor Leo is struggling, and how his wealthy brother refuses to lift a finger. We'll give him an ultimatum right there. Either he helps his family or he's out. What can he do? He won't want to look like a monster in front of everyone. He'll have to give in. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was a performance. They were going to stage my public shaming, banking on my fear of judgment from the extended family. They would paint me as a villain, a cold-hearted miser who would rather see his brother suffer than part with his precious money. And they were going to enjoy it. Leo, I had no doubt, was in on it. He would play the role of the tragic victim perfectly. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. For a moment, all I felt was a crushing sense of defeat. How could I fight this? They were my parents. The narrative they spun would be believed by everyone. I went down to the garage, my mind racing. Mark took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. What happened? I told him everything. The demand, my refusal, the conversation I just overheard. I expected him to be angry on my behalf, to tell me my parents were monsters. He was, and he did. But then he said something that changed everything. So, he said, a slow, calculating smile spreading across his face. They're building a stage to humiliate you. Yeah, I said grimly. Well, you know what they say. Mark leaned back in his chair, tapping a finger on his laptop. Never waste a good stage. A new, audacious idea began to form in my mind. An idea so risky and so terrifying that it just might work. The seed of an idea Mark had planted grew into a full-blown strategy over the next hour. My parents wanted to use the party as their stage. Fine. I would use it as mine. They were bringing an audience. I would bring a star witness. There was only one person who could detonate their narrative so completely that there would be no recovery. Mr. Anderson. David Anderson was the CEO of TechCorp, a major software development firm. For the past 3 months, Mark and I had been in intense, confidential negotiations with him. TechCorp wanted to acquire Momentum AI. They were blown away by the architecture of our platform, and they saw its potential. We had spent weeks going back and forth with their lawyers, hammering out the details of a potential deal. We were on the verge of signing an agreement that would change our lives forever. It was a life-altering sum of money, the kind of money my parents couldn't even comprehend. The final meeting was scheduled for the Monday after the party. But this changed things. It's a crazy ask, I know, I said to Mark, pacing the garage. He's a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. He doesn't go to suburban family barbecues. The worst he can say is no, Mark reasoned. But Justin, think about it. The deal is basically done. We like him. He likes us. He respects you. He might just do it. My heart was hammering against my ribs. It was the boldest move I had ever considered. It felt both insane and perfectly logical. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and found his number. Mr. Anderson, it's Justin Hale, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Justin, good to hear from you. Everything all right? Getting nervous before the big day on Monday? His voice boomed through the phone, friendly and direct. Everything's fine with the deal, sir. Actually, I have a personal and somewhat unusual request. I took a deep breath and laid it all out. I didn't give him the entire sordid family history, but I gave him the essentials. The long-standing family dynamic. The ultimatum. Their plan to publicly shame me at the party on Saturday. And then I made my pitch. They believe I'm an ungrateful son with a moderately successful job who is hoarding his money, I explained. They plan to use family pressure to force me to pay a debt that isn't mine. Your presence, and a simple, truthful announcement, would change that narrative instantly. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I thought I had overstepped, that I had sounded crazy and unprofessional. I was about to apologize when I heard him let out a low chuckle. Justin, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. In my 30 years in this business, I've seen a lot of sharks in the boardroom. Sounds like you've been dealing with them at your dinner table. I've always believed that character is just as important as code. He paused again. I like your boldness, kid. It's the same quality that made me want to buy your company. Send me the address. I'll clear my schedule. I wouldn't miss this for the world. When I hung up the phone, I was trembling, but it wasn't from fear. It was from adrenaline. The game had changed. My parents were setting a trap, not knowing I was about to walk in with a bomb. In the days leading up to the party, I became a ghost in my own home. I adopted a strategy of absolute neutrality. I went to my part-time job, came home, ate dinner in silence if they were there, and retreated to my room. I was polite, quiet, and completely unreadable. This, I realized, was far more unsettling for them than any argument would have been. My silence was a vacuum, and they rushed to fill it with their own assumptions. They saw my quiet demeanor not as resolve, but as fear. They interpreted my lack of fight as a sign that I was weakening, that their plan was already working, and that on Saturday, I would crumble under the weight of public opinion. My mother tried to break through my composure with saccharine-sweet guilt trips. "I was just looking at your baby photos, Justin," she'd say, her voice dripping with false nostalgia. "You were such a sweet boy, always so eager to please." I would just nod and continue eating my cereal. My father took a different approach. Intimidation. He'd make comments about the rising cost of living, about how lucky I was to have a roof over my head for so little. "A promotion at work should mean you can contribute more to the household," he'd declare to the empty room, knowing I was listening. He was trying to establish the logic for their future claim on my earnings. I'd simply reply, "I'll keep that in mind," with a completely flat tone. Leo was the most transparent. He swaggered around the house with a newfound arrogance. He saw me as a walking, talking ATM that was just a few days away from dispensing his get-out-of-jail-free card. He'd make snide remarks. "Tough week at the office, bro? Don't worry, the weekend's almost here. Big family fun." During this time, I started to quietly prepare. In the evenings, I packed. Not clothes, but memories. I went through old boxes, pulling out a few faded photos of me and my grandmother, my high school diploma, the small trophy I'd won at my first hackathon. I placed them carefully in a single cardboard box. It was a small collection, a testament to a life lived in the margins of my own family. Each item was a piece of the person I had built on my own. One afternoon, while I was taking out the trash, I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, tending to her roses. She was a kind, elderly woman who had known me since I was a boy. She gave me a sad, knowing smile. "You're a good boy, Justin," she said quietly, her voice barely carrying over the fence. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She didn't know the details, but she had seen enough over the years. The different sets of clothes, the separate meals, the way my parents' voices changed when they spoke to me versus how they spoke to Leo. Her simple words of validation felt like a shield. That night, looking at the small box on my floor, I didn't feel sadness. I felt a sense of clarity. This house was not my home. It was just a building that held my things. My home was something I was going to build for myself, starting this Saturday. The night before the party was a strange combination of calm and electric tension. The house was filled with the frantic energy of last-minute preparations. My mother was barking orders about silverware. My father was on the phone arguing with the party rental company about the number of chairs, and Leo was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone, completely useless. I was an island of stillness in their chaotic sea. I spent most of the evening in my room, on a video call with Mark. We went over the final details of the acquisition contract one last time, our lawyers having sent the finalized version that afternoon. The numbers on the screen looked fake, surreal. Even after months of negotiation, it was hard to believe it was real. "You sure about this, man?" Mark asked, his face serious on my laptop screen. "You don't have to do this. We can just sign the papers on Monday and you can walk away. You don't owe them a show." "It's not for them," I said, and the words felt truer than anything I'd ever said. "It's for me. For the kid who had to buy his own school supplies. For the teenager who ate ramen while they ate steak. I'm not doing this to hurt them, Mark. I'm doing it to free myself. I need to end their story so I can finally start my own." Mark nodded slowly, understanding. "Okay, then let's make it a good one." We ran through the plan for the next day one more time. Mr. Anderson would arrive about an hour into the party, posing as a family friend of a distant cousin to avoid suspicion. He would observe, and I would give him a subtle nod when the time was right. The rest, he had assured me, he would handle. After the call, I sat in the quiet of my room for a long time. I pulled out that old photo of my family. It was from a vacation to the Grand Canyon years ago. My father had his arm around Leo, both of them grinning at the camera. My mother was standing next to them, beaming, and I was off to the side, slightly out of focus, a shadow at the edge of the frame. For my entire life, that's what I had been. An afterthought, a supporting character in the story of the golden child. I looked at the young boy in the photo, at his lonely eyes and forced smile, and I made him a promise. Tomorrow I would step out of the shadows. Tomorrow I would take control of the narrative. I gently placed the photo into the cardboard box with my other things and slid it under my bed. I was ready. The party was exactly as I expected. A symphony of suburban pretense. The backyard was filled with relatives and neighbors making small talk, balancing paper plates of food, and pretending to be more interested in each other's lives than they actually were. I moved through the crowd like a shadow, offering polite nods and brief smiles, my stomach churning with a mixture of dread and anticipation. About an hour in, I saw him. Mr. Anderson arrived, dressed in a casual but clearly expensive polo shirt and slacks. He looked less like a corporate titan and more like a distinguished retiree enjoying his weekend. As planned, my second cousin introduced him as an old colleague, and he blended in seamlessly, grabbing a drink and making small talk with my Uncle Robert about the stock market. Nobody gave him a second glance. My parents were in their element, playing the roles of gracious hosts. My father was holding court by the grill, laughing too loudly at his own jokes. My mother was flitting between groups, refilling wine glasses and collecting compliments on her potato salad. Leo was soaking up the attention, retelling the sob story of his failed business to anyone who would listen, casting himself as a young visionary who had been hit by a stroke of bad luck. They were laying the groundwork, seeding the narrative for the main event. Finally, my father clinked a knife against his glass, calling for everyone's attention. A hush fell over the backyard. This was it. "Hey, everyone," he began, a broad, benevolent smile on his face. "Helen and I just want to thank you all for coming. It means the world to us to have our family and friends here." He paused for effect. Family is the most important thing. It's about being there for each other, in good times and in bad. His eyes found me in the crowd. The benevolent smile tightened into something harder. "And recently, our family has faced some bad times. As many of you know, our son Leo here took a brave risk to start his own business." He put a proud arm around Leo's shoulders. "Unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond his control, it didn't work out, and it's left him in a difficult financial position." Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the crowd. Leo looked down at his feet, the picture of humility and disappointment. "But," my father continued, his voice rising, "the beautiful thing about family is that we lift each other up. We all pitch in. And we have been so proud of our other son, Justin." He pointed directly at me. The spotlight was on. "He's done very well for himself with his tech job. A real promotion, a great new salary. He's in a position to help his brother, to lift him up, to do the right thing." The air grew thick with expectation. I could feel every eye on me. They weren't just watching. They were judging. My mother stepped forward, her voice quivering. "But for some reason, Justin, he has refused. He won't help his own brother." A collective gasp went through the older aunts. Aunt Carol shot me a look of pure, venomous pity. This was the moment. My father took a step towards me, his face a mask of righteous authority. "So we're doing this now, in front of the family that loves you. We are asking you one last time, Justin. Will you pay Leo's $10,000 debt and do your duty as a son and a brother? Or will you turn your back on this family for good? Because you can't have it both ways. Either you're with us, or you're out. And if you're out, you can pack your bags tonight." He stood there, arms crossed, waiting for my surrender. The entire party was frozen, a tableau of suburban justice. In the silence, I subtly met Mr. Anderson's gaze from across the lawn. I gave him the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. He set his drink down on a table and began to walk forward. The show was about to begin. As Mr. Anderson moved, a path seemed to clear for him. He walked with an easy authority that commanded attention. He stopped beside my father, who looked at him with annoyance, irritated by the interruption to his grand performance. "Richard, isn't it?" Mr. Anderson said, his voice calm but carrying across the silent yard. "My name is David Anderson. I think there's been a slight misunderstanding about Justin's financial situation." My father scowled. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "This is a private family matter. Ordinarily it would be," Mr. Anderson replied smoothly. "But when it involves one of my company's most valuable assets, I feel compelled to clarify. He turned to face the crowd. You see, Richard is right that Justin has done well for himself. But he has his facts wrong. Justin doesn't have a tech job with a great new salary. He is the co-founder and chief architect of his own company, Momentum AI. A few confused murmurs started. My parents exchanged a look of disbelief. Mr. Anderson continued, his voice gaining strength. He isn't just an employee, he's a visionary. And his little computer project, as I've heard it called, is actually a revolutionary piece of software that my company, TechCorp, is in the final stages of acquiring. He let that sink in for a moment before delivering the final, devastating blow. We're finalizing the papers on Monday. The acquisition price for Momentum AI, the company your son built from scratch in a garage, is $7 million. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a silence so profound you could hear the buzz of a fly by the potato salad. $7 million. The number hung in the air, seeming to shimmer in the afternoon sun. I watched my father's face. The smug, righteous anger drained away, replaced by a slack-jawed, vacant stare. His skin went from ruddy to a pale, sickly gray. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Leo looked as if he'd been physically struck, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Mr. Anderson wasn't finished. He put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that was also a clear alignment of power. We at TechCorp are not just buying a piece of software. We're investing in talent. And Justin Hale is one of the brightest young talents I have ever encountered. We consider it a privilege to be in business with him. He then looked directly at my father, his friendly demeanor gone, replaced by a steely coldness. So, you'll have to forgive me if I find it a little confusing that you'd be willing to throw away a relationship with a man of his character and caliber over a petty $10,000 debt. Frankly, sir, your loss is my gain. The spell was broken. The backyard erupted in a cacophony of whispers. The narrative had been shattered. I was no longer the ungrateful, selfish son. I was the secret millionaire, the hidden genius. And my parents were the fools who had just tried to publicly disown their winning lottery ticket. The looks on the faces of my relatives had changed from pity for my parents to a stunned, horrified pity for me. They finally saw. They saw it all. The years of neglect, the blatant favoritism, the shocking injustice. It was all laid bare in the wreckage of my parents' greed. This was the moment everything changed. The moment I finally took back control of my own life. Thank you for staying with me this far. You are amazing. Please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you made it here with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone else. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The party disintegrated with record speed. People made awkward excuses and slipped away, not wanting to be caught in the fallout of the explosion they had just witnessed. They couldn't look my parents in the eye. They couldn't look me in the eye. Within 20 minutes, the only people left in the backyard were me, my parents, Leo, and Mr. Anderson, who had stayed by my side like a silent bodyguard. Once the last guest had scurried away, the silence was replaced by a desperate, clumsy attempt at damage control. Justin, my mother whispered, taking a shaky step towards me. Her face was a mess of confusion and panic. The performative tears from before were now very real. Justin, honey, we didn't understand. Oh, I think you understood perfectly, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. You understood that you had a problem named Leo, and you thought you had a solution named Justin. The only thing you didn't understand was the actual number. My father, having regained some of his color, tried to assert his authority one last time, but it came out as a weak imitation of his earlier bluster. Now, hold on. This is still a family matter. We can talk about this inside. Mr. Anderson, thank you for your clarification, but we can handle it from here. Mr. Anderson just raised an eyebrow and looked at me, leaving the decision in my hands. There's nothing left to talk about, I said, looking directly at my father. You gave me an ultimatum. You said either I pay or I'm out of the family. I'm not paying. We didn't mean it like that. Helen wailed. You're our son. We were just trying to teach you a lesson about family responsibility. No, I said, the word sharp and final. You taught me my lesson about family a long time ago. You taught me that your love is conditional. You taught me that my worth is tied to my utility. And you just taught me that the only time you see me as your son is when you think you can get something from me. Leo, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his voice a pathetic whine. Come on, Justin. It's me, your brother. Are you really going to let this ruin everything? I turned to him, and for the first time, I think he really saw the stranger I had become. Ruin what, Leo? There's nothing left to ruin. You made your choices. They made theirs. Now I'm making mine. I turned back to my parents. You wanted me out of the house. You have your wish. I'll be gone within the hour. I gave a final nod to Mr. Anderson. Thank you for coming, David. Any time, Justin, he said, shaking my hand firmly. Then I turned my back on them. I walked towards the house, leaving the three of them standing there amidst the debris of their party and their shattered expectations. I didn't look back. Walking into the house felt different. It was no longer my home, or even the place I was temporarily staying. It was just a building, a set of rooms filled with furniture and memories that no longer belonged to me. The air was still and heavy with the ghosts of the party. I went straight to my room and pulled the single cardboard box from under my bed. It was all I needed. Everything else, the clothes, the books, the furniture, they were just things and I felt no attachment to them. They were part of a life I was leaving behind. My hands were steady as I picked up the box. I took one last look around the room that had been my sanctuary and my prison for so many years. I felt no nostalgia, no sadness, only a profound sense of peace. The chains had been broken. As I walked down the hallway, I could hear my mother sobbing in the living room. I could hear my father's low, angry voice, likely blaming her, blaming Leo, blaming anyone but himself. I walked past the living room entrance without a glance. Their drama was no longer my concern. Mark was waiting for me in his car at the end of the street, just as we had planned. The engine was running. I opened the back door and placed the box gently on the seat before getting in the front. So? He asked, his eyes searching my face. How do you feel? I leaned my head back against the headrest and watched my childhood home shrink in the rearview mirror. I thought I would feel anger or grief or some kind of triumphant glee. But I didn't. I just felt light. Free, I said, a small smile touching my lips for the first time that day. I feel free. As Mark pulled away from the curb, I took out my phone. I scrolled to my father's contact, then my mother's, then Leo's. I pressed delete on each one. It wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of closure. The road ahead was unknown, but for the first time in my life it was entirely my own. The year that followed was a blur of activity, the best kind of chaos. The acquisition by TechCorp went through smoothly. Suddenly, Mark and I were not just founders, but division heads within a major corporation, with the resources and support to scale Momentum AI beyond our wildest dreams. The work was demanding, but it was fulfilling in a way I had never known. Every success was ours, built on our merit, not on manipulation or family ties. With financial security came a different kind of freedom. The first thing I did was buy a condo downtown. It was a clean, modern space with huge windows that looked out over the city. The first night I spent there, sleeping on an air mattress on the floor because I hadn't bought any furniture yet, I felt more at home than I ever had in my parents' house. This space was mine. I had earned it. I slowly started to build a life. I bought furniture. I learned to cook proper meals. I reconnected with old college friends and made new ones at work. My family became the people who showed up for me. Mark and his loud, wonderful family who insisted I come for Sunday dinner every week. My team at work, a group of brilliant, funny people who shared my passion, and a few close friends who had known my story and supported me through it all. I also started investing in myself, not just financially, but emotionally. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Evans, to unpack the years of emotional neglect. It was hard work, digging through the layers of hurt and anger, but it was necessary. She helped me understand that the desperation my parents had for Leo's success and their indifference to mine wasn't really about me or him. It was about them, about their own insecurities and their need for a reflection they could be proud of. Leo was a mirror. I was a window showing them a world they didn't understand. I found joy in small things. I joined a hiking club and spent weekends exploring the mountains outside the city. I adopted a rescue dog, a scruffy terrier mix I named Buster, whose unconditional affection was a daily balm on old wounds. My life wasn't perfect, but it was authentic. It was a life I was actively choosing and building every single day. One afternoon, about a year after the party, I was sitting in my new office, a corner office with a panoramic view that still felt surreal, when my assistant buzzed. "Justin, there's a package for you. It looks like it's been forwarded from an old address." A few minutes later, she brought in a dusty, yellowed shoebox. My old address was on it, with my name written in my grandmother's familiar, shaky cursive. It was postmarked over 2 years ago, but had clearly been lost in the mail system. My heart skipped a beat. It was a package from her, sent shortly before she passed. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside the box were old letters, photos, and a small, leather-bound journal. The journal was my grandfather's, but nestled among the letters was one addressed to me. I unfolded the brittle paper and began to read. It was a long letter, full of her usual warmth and wisdom, but one part stood out, and it hit me with the force of a physical blow. "I worry about your father," she wrote. "I know he is hard on you, Justin. Please try to understand, though you don't have to forgive. His own father, your grandfather, was a cold and demanding man. He saw Richard not as a son, but as a disappointment. All his praise, all his affection, went to his younger brother, your Uncle Robert. Richard spent his whole life trying to win a love that was never offered freely. I see him doing the same thing to you, repeating a cycle of pain he doesn't even know he's in. He's trying to get from Leo the validation his father never gave him. It's not an excuse, my dear boy, but it is a reason." I sat there stunned. My father, the tyrant, the unmovable force of my childhood, was once just a boy desperate for his own father's approval. He had been the first Justin, and instead of breaking the cycle, he had perpetuated it, passing the wound down to me. It didn't excuse anything he did. It didn't erase the years of neglect or the cruelty of that final day. But it cast his actions in a new, tragic light. He wasn't just a monster. He was a man trapped in a prison of his own past, and he had tried to lock me in there with him. This knowledge settled in my chest, not as forgiveness, but as a kind of sad, final understanding. This could have been a forgotten piece of his own inheritance, a legacy of pain he passed on. Just as I was processing this, an email popped up on my screen. The subject line was a request for dialogue. It was from a Dr. Miller, a family therapist. "Dear Mr. Hale," the email began, "I am writing on behalf of my clients, Richard, Helen, and Leo Hale. They have been in family therapy for the past 6 months. They have expressed a deep desire to open a line of communication with you, in a mediated and safe environment, to take responsibility for their past actions and to express their remorse. They understand and respect that the decision to engage is entirely yours. Should you be open to it, please let me know." I stared at the screen, my grandmother's letter in one hand, the email glowing on my monitor. The past and the future colliding in a single moment. My father's history explaining his actions. An email offering a potential different path forward. For a year, I had felt nothing but the clean, simple relief of being free. Now, a new, far more complicated feeling began to surface. I sat in my condo that evening, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation. Buster was asleep at my feet, his gentle snores a comforting rhythm in the quiet room. The email from Dr. Miller was still open on my laptop, its words seeming to pulse with a life of their own. For so long, the narrative had been simple. I was the victim, they were the villains. My victory was my escape. But my grandmother's letter had complicated that story. It hadn't erased their cruelty, but it had given it a source, a lineage of pain passed from one generation to the next. My father was not just an architect of my suffering. He was a product of his own. Did it matter? Did understanding the root of the poison make the poison any less deadly? I thought about what a meeting would look like. I pictured the three of them in a sterile therapist's office, their faces etched with a rehearsed remorse. I imagined the apologies, the excuses wrapped in therapeutic language. Would it be genuine? Or was it just another strategy, a last-ditch effort to get back into the life of the son who was now a success? Maybe their motivation was the potential loss of a future inheritance, something that now seemed plausible. Then I imagined a different possibility. The possibility that their world, shattered so completely on that day, had forced a genuine, painful reckoning. The possibility that losing me had finally made them see what they had done. People could change, couldn't they? I realized my freedom wasn't just about leaving them behind. True freedom was about having the choice. The choice to engage or the choice to walk away forever, based not on anger or hurt, but on my own terms, for my own well-being. The power was no longer theirs to wield over me. It was mine to decide what my future and my peace looked like. I looked at the email, then at the city lights. I didn't have to decide tonight or tomorrow. The door had been opened, but only I could decide whether to step through it. And whatever I chose, it would be my choice. The boy in the faded photograph was finally in control. He was no longer on the edge of the frame. He was the one holding the camera. I moved my hand to the keyboard and began to type a reply. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between your family and your own well-being? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Please share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.